A woman with no past. A king with no sight. A kingdom built on lies. When their fates collide under a blood moon, the truth will burn everything down. Stick around until the end to see how a girl who was nothing becomes the queen who changes everything. Drop a like and comment which city you're watching from. The Needle went in at 9 p.m. every night. Alara didn't know what was in it anymore, hadn't known for years. But she knew the rhythm. The cold bite of alcohol on her upper arm, the pinch, then the slow creeping heaviness that turned her limbs to stone and her thoughts to fog. Tonight, something was different. Marcus hadn't come yet. She sat on the edge of the cot, bare feet on the splintered wood floor, staring at the cabin door. The single oil lamp flickered. Outside, the wind moved through the pines like a living thing, low and constant. She'd been in this room so long she couldn't remember what silence sounded like without it. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, from waiting. Marcus was never late. The man who kept her here, tall, gray-eyed, with a voice like gravel and hands that never hesitated, had maintained the same schedule for 5 years. Breakfast at dawn, lunch if she behaved, dinner at dusk, Needle at 9. Lights out at 10. She didn't know his last name. Didn't know if Marcus was even his real first name. Didn't know why he kept her alive. But she knew she wasn't allowed to leave. The door creaked open. Alara's breath caught. But it wasn't Marcus. It was the other one, the younger man. She'd seen him maybe a dozen times in 5 years, always in the background, always watching, always leaving before she could make out his face in the dim light. He had a nervous energy Marcus didn't. His eyes darted. His fingers twitched. "Where's Marcus?" she asked. Her voice came out rough. She barely used it anymore. The man didn't answer. He stepped inside, holding a small black case, the syringe kit. "I said, where's—" "Shut up!" He moved quickly, too quickly, crossing the room and grabbing her arm. His grip was harder than Marcus's, meaner. Alara jerked back. "Wait! I said shut up!" He yanked her forward, slamming her wrist against the wooden armrest of the chair. She gasped. The alcohol swab was cold, careless. He wasn't even looking at her arm. He was looking at the door. "Marcus told you to do this?" she asked, heart pounding now. "Marcus is gone." The words hit her like a slap. "What?" "He left. Someone else is coming. Someone who doesn't want you awake when they get here." The needle hovered over her skin, and then she heard it. Voices. Outside, low and clipped. Men, more than one. The younger man heard them too. His hand shook. "Do it," he muttered to himself. "Just do it and go." But he hesitated. Just a second. Just long enough. Alara twisted, hard, and drove her knee up into his gut. He folded with a choked gasp, and the syringe clattered to the floor. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just moved. Her bare feet hit the floor, and she ran. She made it 3 steps before he grabbed her hair. Pain exploded across her scalp as he yanked her back, slamming her into the wall. Her vision blurred. She tasted blood. "You stupid—" She bit his wrist. He screamed, releasing her, and she bolted for the door. The voices outside were louder now, closer, boots on gravel. She didn't care. She hit the door with her shoulder, and it flew open into the night. Cold air slammed into her lungs. The forest was black, endless, swallowing. She ran anyway. Behind her, someone shouted, "She's out! Stop her!" Alara didn't look back. She ran barefoot into the trees, branches whipping her face, roots catching her feet. She fell once, hard, palms scraping against stone. Got up, kept running. She didn't know where she was going, didn't know what lay beyond this forest, didn't know if there was a road, a town, another human being within 100 miles. But she knew one thing. If she stopped, she died. What? The memory came in flashes, broken and wrong, like a film reel missing half its frames. A grand hall, marble floors, chandeliers. Her father's voice, deep, warm. "Stay close, little one." Gold, everywhere. On the walls, the frames, the plates. And then, screaming, fire, a woman's face, beautiful and cold, leaning over her. Forget. And she had. Oops. Alara collapsed against a tree, gasping for air. Her lungs burned. Her feet were torn and bleeding. She'd been running for how long? An hour? 2? The voices had faded, but she knew they were still coming. She forced herself upright, gripping the bark for balance. The forest stretched in every direction, dark and indifferent. No lights, no roads, no help. Think. But thinking was hard. Her head was thick, sluggish. Whatever Marcus had been giving her for 5 years had soaked into her bones, her blood. She could barely remember her own name half the time. Alara. That was it. That was all she had. She took a shaking breath and kept moving. The cabin had been deep in the wilderness. She knew that much. Marcus had told her once, years ago, that the nearest town was 60 miles south. She didn't know if he'd been lying, didn't know which direction south even was. But she kept walking. Her body moved on instinct, stumbling through underbrush, over fallen logs, through shallow creeks that numbed her feet. The moon was high and full, casting pale light through the canopy. It was the only reason she could see at all. And then she heard it. Water. Running water. Not a creek, something bigger. She followed the sound and found a river, wide and black under the moonlight, cutting through the trees like a scar. A road ran parallel to it. Alara's heart lurched. She staggered toward it, feet slipping on the muddy bank. The road was narrow, unpaved, rutted with tire tracks. But it was something. She stood in the middle of it, swaying, and looked both ways. Nothing. Just trees. Just darkness. And then, headlights. They appeared in the distance, coming fast. Alara froze. Her body screamed at her to run, to hide, but her legs wouldn't move. She was too tired, too broken. The vehicle, a black SUV, skidded to a stop 10 feet away. The door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His face was shadowed, but she could see his eyes, pale, almost silver in the headlights. He moved like a predator, smooth and deliberate. "Who are you?" His voice was low, rough, with an edge of command that made her spine straighten despite herself. Alara opened her mouth. No words came out. He took a step closer. She took a step back. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, but it wasn't gentle. It was a statement of fact. Her voice cracked. "I need help." His gaze swept over her. Torn nightgown, bare feet, blood on her hands, her face. She saw something flicker in his expression. Not pity, something sharper. "Get in the car," he said. "No. You're injured, you're hypothermic, and whoever you're running from is going to find you in about 10 minutes. He nodded toward the trees behind her. "So get in the car or die out here. Your choice." Alara looked back at the forest. She couldn't hear them yet, but she knew they were coming. She looked at the man again. Trust no one. Marcus had told her that once, the only advice he'd ever given her. But standing here, bleeding and barefoot in the middle of nowhere, she didn't have a choice. She got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and pine. The man slid into the driver's seat and pulled back onto the road without a word. The headlights cut through the darkness, and the forest blurred past. Alara pressed herself against the passenger door, watching him. He didn't look at her. His hands were steady on the wheel. His jaw was tight. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My estate." "Why?" "Because you need a doctor, and I don't leave people to die on the side of the road. You don't even know me." "I don't need to." Silence settled between them. Alara's hands shook in her lap. The warmth of the car was making her dizzy. She could feel her body starting to shut down, the adrenaline draining away. "What's your name?" she asked. He glanced at her, just once. His eyes were pale gray, cold and unreadable. "Kael," he said. "Kael what?" "Draven." The name meant nothing to her. She nodded slowly, her vision blurring at the edges. "And you?" he asked. "Alara." "Alara what?" She closed her eyes. "I don't know." She woke to the sound of voices, low, urgent, close. Alara's eyes flew open. She was lying on something soft, a bed, not the cot. A real bed, with clean sheets and a thick blanket pulled up to her chin. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp on the bedside table. "Where?" The voices came from the hallway. The door was cracked open. "Can't just bring her here, Kael. You don't know who she is. where she came from. She was dying. And that's your problem? It is now. This is insane. The council will... I don't care what the council thinks. Footsteps. Alara sat up slowly, her head pounding. Her feet were bandaged, her hands too. Someone had cleaned her up, dressed her in a soft white shirt that wasn't hers. The door opened. Kael stepped inside. He was wearing black, head to toe, and his pale eyes found her immediately. "You're awake," he said. "Where am I?" "My home." "Why?" "Because you asked for help." Alara stared at him. He stared back. There was something about the way he looked at her, intense, unblinking, like he was trying to see through her skin. "I need to go," she said. "You can't. You can't keep me here." "I'm not keeping you. I'm telling you the truth. You're 50 miles from the nearest town, and you're in no condition to walk. So sit, rest, eat, and when you're ready, I'll take you wherever you want to go." "Why would you do that?" Kael's jaw tightened. He looked away, just for a second. "I don't know," he said quietly. And for the first time, Alara believed him. She stayed, not because she trusted him, but because she had nowhere else to go. The estate was massive, stone walls, vaulted ceilings, rooms that stretched on forever. It felt old, ancient, like something out of a dream she couldn't quite remember. Kael kept his distance. He gave her a room, food, clean clothes. A doctor came, a woman with sharp eyes and gentle hands who asked no questions. But Alara felt it. The weight of eyes on her, whispers in the hallways, servants who looked at her like she was a threat. And then there was the woman. She appeared on the third day, tall, regal, with dark hair and cold blue eyes. She swept into Alara's room without knocking. "So," the woman said, "you're the stray my son dragged home." Alara stood. "Who are you?" "Queen Regent Isolde Draven." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And you are?" "Alara." "Just Alara?" "Yes." Isolde's gaze swept over her, slow and calculating. How convenient. A girl with no name, no past, no family. She took a step closer. "What do you want from my son?" "I don't want anything." "Everyone wants something." Alara held her ground. "I didn't ask to be here." "Then leave." "I will. When I'm ready." Isolde's smile sharpened. "You're brave. I'll give you that. Foolish, but brave." She turned toward the door, then paused. "A word of advice, girl. Don't get too comfortable. This world eats girls like you alive." She left. Alara stood there, heart pounding, fists clenched. And somewhere deep inside her, something stirred, something angry, something that remembered. That night she couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls, restless, her bare feet silent on the stone floors. The estate was quiet, empty, but she could feel it, something humming beneath the surface. Power, old power. She found herself in a long gallery lined with portraits, kings and queens stretching back centuries. Their eyes followed her as she walked, and then she stopped. At the end of the hall was a portrait of a man, young, strong, golden-eyed, and proud. The plaque beneath it read, "King Aldrich Thorn, beloved ruler, murdered in cold blood." Alara stared at the face, and something inside her cracked. She knew that face. She knew those eyes. "Stay close, little one." Her knees gave out. She hit the floor gasping as the memory slammed into her like a tidal wave. Fire, screaming, a woman's cold smile. Forget. But she hadn't forgotten. Not all of it. Not him. "Alara?" She looked up. Kael stood at the end of the hall, silhouetted in the moonlight. "Are you hurt?" he asked, moving toward her. Her voice broke. "I know him." Kael stopped. "What?" She pointed at the portrait with a shaking hand. "I know him. That's my father." Silence. Kael's face went blank. "That's impossible." "It's not." Tears burned her eyes. "My name is Alara Thorn, and someone erased me." Kael didn't move for a long moment. He just stood there, staring at her like she'd spoken in a language he didn't understand. "Say that again," he said slowly. Alara's hands were still shaking. She pressed them against the cold floor, trying to steady herself. My name is Alara Thorne. That man, she pointed at the portrait, is my father, King Aldrich Thorne. King Aldrich died 15 years ago. I know. He had no children. That's what they told you, her voice cracked. But I remember him. I remember his voice, his hands, the way he used to... She stopped, throat closing. I remember. Kael's jaw worked. His pale eyes swept over her face, searching for something. A lie. A crack. Anything that would make this make sense. That's impossible, he said again, but his voice was quieter now, less certain. Then explain this. Alara pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. Explain why I know that portrait. Why I know this place. Why? She pressed a hand to her temple. The memories were coming faster now, sharper, cutting through the fog that had lived in her head for 5 years. There was a garden, east side of the estate, white roses, a fountain with a stone wolf. Kael went very still. How do you know that? Because I used to play there. Her breath hitched. Before someone took me, before they erased me. Silence fell between them, thick and heavy. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Somewhere deep in the estate, a door slammed. Kael took a step closer. Then another. He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands had curled into fists at his sides. If what you're saying is true, he said quietly, then someone committed regicide. Someone killed a king and hid his heir for 15 years. His eyes narrowed. And that someone is still alive, still in power. Alara met his gaze. Yes? Do you know who? She opened her mouth, closed it. The memories were there, so close, but they were slippery, incomplete. She could see flashes. A woman's face, cold and beautiful. A voice whispering in the dark. Fire. I don't know, she admitted. Not yet. Kael studied her for another long moment. Then he turned and walked to the window, staring out into the darkness. You can't tell anyone this, he said. Why not? Because if you're right, the person who did this has spent 15 years covering their tracks. They won't hesitate to finish the job. He glanced back at her. And if you're wrong, you'll be locked up as a lunatic or worse. I'm not wrong. Then prove it. Alara's hands clenched. How? I don't know, but until you do, you keep your mouth shut. You stay here. You stay alive. His voice hardened. Understood? She wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she didn't take orders from him, that she'd spent 5 years being controlled and she was done. But the look in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't trying to control her. He was trying to protect her. And that scared her more than anything. Fine, she said. He nodded once, then turned back to the window. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning. But Alara didn't move. She stood there, staring at the portrait of her father, and felt something inside her chest crack open. She wasn't nobody. She was a thorn. And someone was going to pay for what they'd taken from her. Morning came too fast. Alara woke to sunlight streaming through the heavy curtains and the sound of voices in the hallway. She sat up, head pounding, and pressed a hand to her temple. The memories from last night were still there, sharp and vivid, but they raised more questions than answers. A knock at the door. Come in, she called, her voice rough. The door opened and a young woman stepped inside carrying a tray. She was small, dark-haired, with nervous eyes that darted everywhere except Alara's face. Breakfast, the woman said quietly, setting the tray on the bedside table. Thank you. The woman nodded and turned to leave. Wait, Alara said. What's your name? The woman hesitated, glancing back. Mira. How long have you worked here, Mira? 5 years. Do you like it? Mira's brow furrowed like the question had never occurred to her before. It's a job. What about the people here? The Queen? Kael? At Kael's name, something flickered across Mira's face. Fear, or maybe respect, it was hard to tell. The Alpha King is fair, Mira said carefully. Her Majesty is particular. Particular how? Mira's gaze dropped. I should go. Mira, but the woman was already slipping out the door, closing it softly behind her. Alara sat back against the pillows, frustration simmering in her chest. Everyone here was afraid. Of what, she didn't know yet, but she intended to find out. She picked at the breakfast, bread, cheese, fruit, but her stomach was too knotted to eat much. Instead, she dressed in the clothes that had been left for her, simple pants and a tunic, soft and well made, and stepped into the hallway. The estate was quieter in the daylight, but no less imposing. The stone walls seemed to absorb sound, and her footsteps echoed as she walked. She passed servants who ducked their heads and hurried past, guards who watched her with flat, unreadable eyes. She found Kyle in a large study on the second floor. He was standing at a massive desk covered in maps and documents, his back to the door. He didn't turn when she entered. "You're supposed to be resting," he said. "I've rested enough." Clearly. Alara crossed the room and stopped on the opposite side of the desk. "I need to see the records." "What records?" "Anything about my father, his death, what happened to his family." Kyle finally looked up. His pale eyes were tired, shadowed. "Those records are sealed." "Then unseal them." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "You're the king." "Alpha King," he corrected. "And the records were sealed by the council 15 years ago. I can't just overturn that without cause." "I just told you the cause." "You told me a story." His voice was flat. "I believe you, but belief isn't proof. And without proof, all you'll do is paint a target on your back." Alara leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. "Then help me find proof." Kyle's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse, but then he sighed and pulled a leather-bound ledger from a drawer. "This is all I have," he said, sliding it toward her. "My father's notes. He was on the council when Aldrich died. There might be something useful." Alara opened the ledger, scanning the pages. The handwriting was cramped, hurried. Notes about meetings, disputes, trade agreements. And then, near the middle, a single line that made her breath catch. "Aldrich's death. Questions remain. Isolde insists we move forward. Why the rush?" She looked up at Kyle. "Your father suspected something." "He suspected a lot of things. Didn't mean he could prove them." "What happened to him?" Kyle's expression went cold. "He died. 3 years after Aldrich." "How?" "Hunting accident." The words were clipped. Final. Alara closed the ledger slowly. "You don't believe that." "It doesn't matter what I believe." "Yes, it does." Kyle's hands flattened on the desk. "My father is dead. Yours is dead. Digging into the past won't bring them back." "No. But it might stop whoever killed them from doing it again." His eyes locked on hers, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful. Kyle straightened. "Hide the ledger." Alara shoved it into a desk drawer just as the door opened. Isolde swept in, her dark hair pinned back, her cold blue eyes sharp as glass. She wore a deep crimson gown that made her look like a blade wrapped in silk. "Kyle," she said, her voice smooth. "I need a word." "I'm busy." "It's urgent." Kyle's jaw worked. He glanced at Alara, then back at his mother. "Fine. Alara, wait outside." Alara hesitated, but the look on Kyle's face left no room for argument. She slipped out into the hallway and closed the door behind her. But she didn't leave. She pressed her ear to the wood and listened. "Can't keep her here," Isolde was saying, her voice low and sharp. "I can do whatever I want. Not when it threatens the stability of this kingdom." "She's not a threat. She's a stranger with no past and convenient amnesia. The council is already asking questions. Let them ask." "Kyle," Isolde's voice softened, turned almost pleading. "I know you think you're helping her, but you don't know what you're dealing with. This girl has a name. This girl could destroy everything we've built, or she could be exactly what we need." Silence. Then Isolde's voice, colder than ever. "You're blinded by something you don't understand, and it's going to get you killed." Footsteps approached the door. Alara barely had time to step back before it swung open. Isolde stopped short, her eyes narrowing when she saw Alara standing there. "Eavesdropping, are we?" Alara lifted her chin. Just waiting. Isolde's smile was thin and sharp. Of course you were. She brushed past, her shoulder bumping Alara's deliberately, and disappeared down the hallway. Alara stepped back into the study. Kael was standing by the window, his hands braced on the sill, his shoulders tense. She hates me, Alara said. She hates everyone. No, she hates me specifically. Alara crossed her arms. Why? Kael didn't answer. Kael. He turned, and the look on his face stopped her cold. There was something there, something raw and unguarded. I don't know, he said quietly, but I intend to find out. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Alara spent most of her time in the library, a massive room lined floor to ceiling with books and scrolls, searching for anything that might confirm her memories. She found records of her father's reign, glowing accounts of his leadership, his vision, his strength. But there was nothing about a daughter, nothing about an heir. It was like she'd been erased from history itself. She also found something else, a reference to a curse, brief, buried in a dusty medical journal from 20 years ago. It talked about a rare affliction that could steal sight, tied to ancient bloodlines and broken bonds. Kael's curse. She brought the journal to him that night, finding him in the training yard behind the estate. He was alone, moving through a series of combat drills with a wooden staff, his movements precise despite the blindness that had plagued him for years. You can fight, she said, stepping into the yard. He stopped, breathing hard. I can do a lot of things. How? Practice. Instinct. He set the staff aside and grabbed a towel, wiping sweat from his face. What do you want, Alara? She held up the journal. I found something about your curse. His expression darkened. I'm not cursed. The records say otherwise. The records are wrong. Are they? She flipped to the marked page and read aloud. A severing of the fated bond can result in loss of sight, strength, or vitality. The affliction persists until the bond is restored or one party dies. She looked up. Sound familiar? Kael's jaw clenched. Where did you find that? The library. It's been there the whole time. He took the journal from her hands and scanned the page, his expression unreadable. Then he closed it and handed it back. It's a myth, he said. What if it's not? Then it doesn't matter. I've lived like this for 5 years. I'll live like this for 50 more if I have to. You don't have to. He turned to face her fully, and she saw the frustration in his eyes. What do you want me to say, Alara? That I'm cursed because some bond I never knew about was severed? That there's someone out there who could fix me if I just found them? He laughed, sharp and bitter. That's not how life works. Maybe it is. It's not. They stood there, the night air cold between them, and Alara felt something shift, a pull, a certainty she couldn't name. When you found me, she said quietly, you said something happened. When we touched. Kael went very still. You saw something, she continued. Didn't you? He didn't answer. Kael, it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. His hands curled into fists. Drop it, Alara. But she couldn't, because the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. The way he'd looked at her that first night. The way his blindness had flickered just for a moment when their hands had touched. The bond. What if it's me? She whispered. Kael's head snapped up. What? What if I'm the one you're bonded to? The silence that followed was deafening. And then Kael laughed. It was a hollow, broken sound. That's impossible. Why? Because bonds like that are chosen, fated, and I've never... He stopped, shaking his head. No. Kael, I said no. His voice was hard now, final. Go back inside, Alara. She wanted to argue, wanted to push, but the look on his face told her she'd already gone too far. So she turned and walked away, the journal clutched tight in her hands. And as she disappeared into the estate, she didn't see the way Kael's hands trembled, or the way he sank onto the bench, head in his hands, as the truth he'd been running from finally caught up to him. The attack came 2 nights later. Alara woke to the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright, heart pounding, and grabbed the lamp from the bedside table. The room was dark, the curtains drawn, but she could hear footsteps in the hallway. too many footsteps. She slipped out of bed and crept to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. Voices, low and urgent, and then a scream. Alara threw the door open and ran into the hallway. Smoke was already filling the air, thick and acrid. She could hear shouting, the clash of metal, the crackle of flames. The estate was under attack. She ran toward the main staircase, but a guard stepped into her path, his sword drawn. "Get back to your room," he barked. "What's happening? Now!" But before he could say more, an arrow took him in the throat. He dropped, choking, and Alara stumbled back, her scream caught in her throat. A figure stepped out of the smoke. Tall, hooded, moving with the kind of precision that came from training. An assassin. Alara turned and ran. She made it 3 steps before a hand grabbed her hair and yanked her back. Pain exploded across her scalp, and she hit the floor hard. The assassin loomed over her, raising a blade. And then Kyle was there. He moved like lightning, his staff cracking against the assassin's wrist. The blade clattered to the floor. Kyle didn't stop. He drove the staff into the man's chest, sending him sprawling, then turned and grabbed Alara's arm. "Come on!" They ran together through the smoke and chaos, Kyle moving with a surety that shouldn't have been possible for a blind man. He led her down a narrow hallway, through a hidden door, and into a stone passage that smelled of damp and earth.
"Where are we going?" Alara gasped. "Somewhere safe." They emerged into a small chamber lit by a single torch.
Kale slammed the door behind them and bolted it. Alara leaned against the wall, chest heaving. What was that? An assassination attempt. On who? Kale looked at her, his pale eyes hard. On you. Her blood went cold. How do you know? Because they went straight for your room. He crossed the chamber and grabbed a pack from a hidden alcove. We don't have much time. They'll find this passage eventually. Then what do? We run. Alara's hands shook. I can't keep running. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. She straightened, meeting his gaze. I'm done running, Kale. I'm done hiding. If someone wants me dead, then I'm going to find out who. And I'm going to make them regret it. Kale stared at her, and for the first time she saw something like respect in his eyes. Then we do this together, he said. And before she could respond, the door exploded inward. The door shattered into splinters, and 3 figures poured through the opening like smoke given form. They moved fast, too fast, and Alara barely had time to register the glint of steel before Kyle shoved her behind him. Stay back, he growled. The first assassin lunged. Kyle met him with the staff, deflecting the blade with a crack that echoed through the small chamber. He spun, driving the butt of the staff into the second attacker's gut, then brought it up hard under the man's chin. The assassin crumpled, but the third one was already moving toward Alara. She grabbed the torch from the wall and swung it wildly. The flames caught the assassin's cloak, and he stumbled back with a curse. Alara didn't think. She just ran at him, driving the torch into his face. He screamed and fell. Kyle finished the first assassin with a brutal strike to the temple, then turned to her, breathing hard. Go, he said. Now. They ran. The passage twisted and turned, the stone walls pressing close. Alara could hear footsteps behind them, more of them, gaining ground. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't stop. Kyle grabbed her hand and pulled her into a side tunnel. They burst through another door, and suddenly they were outside, the cold night air hitting them like a slap. The forest stretched before them, black and endless. This way, Kyle said, and they plunged into the trees. They ran for what felt like hours. The moon was high and full, casting pale light through the canopy, and Alara's feet pounded against the earth until she thought her heart would give out. But Kyle didn't slow. He moved through the forest like he'd memorized every root, every branch, every stone. Finally, he stopped in a small clearing and held up a hand. Alara doubled over, gasping for air. Are they still following us? Kyle tilted his head, listening. The forest was silent except for the wind and the distant hoot of an owl. For now, no, he said, but they'll pick up the trail at dawn. Who were they? Professionals? Well-trained? Well-paid? He turned to face her, and even in the dim light she could see the tension in his jaw. Someone wants you dead badly enough to send a kill squad into my home. Alara straightened, her breath still ragged. Your mother. I don't know. Yes, you do. Kael's hands curled into fists. Even if it was her, I can't prove it. And accusing the Queen Regent of attempted murder without proof would start a civil war. Maybe that's what it takes. No? His voice was hard. You don't understand what that would mean. The kingdom is barely holding together as it is. If the council fractures, if the noble houses turn on each other, he stopped, shaking his head. Thousands would die. And how many have already died because someone's been covering up the truth? Kael's jaw worked. He didn't answer. Alara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold it was. She was still wearing the thin nightclothes she'd gone to bed in, and her feet were bare again. Blood seeped from cuts she hadn't noticed during the run. Kael saw her shivering and shrugged off his coat, draping it over her shoulders. It smelled like pine and smoke. We need shelter, he said. There's a hunting cabin about 2 miles north. We can rest there until morning.
And then what? Then we figure out who wants you dead and why.
The cabin was small and dark, tucked into a grove of ancient pines. Kael broke the lock with a sharp twist and pushed the door open. Inside it smelled of dust and old wood, but it was dry and out of the wind. Alara sank onto a wooden bench while Kael moved through the space, checking the shutters, securing the door. He moved with that same unsettling precision, like his blindness was more of an inconvenience than a disability. How do you do that? She asked. Do what? Move like you can see. Kael paused, his back to her. I can't see. Not the way you do, but I can sense things. Movement, heat, sound. He turned to face her. It's not the same, but it's enough. Enough for what? To survive. Alara pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders. That's all you do, isn't it? Survive. It's all any of us do. No. She shook her head. Some people live. You just exist. Kael's expression hardened. You don't know anything about me. Well, I know you've been cursed for 5 years, and you've done nothing to break it. There's nothing to break. Liar. The word hung in the air between them, sharp and accusing. Kael's hands flexed at his sides, and for a moment, Alara thought he might walk out. But he didn't. Instead, he crossed the room and sat down on the bench across from her, his pale eyes fixed somewhere past her shoulder. You want to know the truth? He said quietly. Fine. I was cursed. 5 years ago. The healers said it was tied to a severed bond, something I didn't even know existed. They said the only way to break it was to find my fated mate and restore what was broken. He laughed, bitter and hollow. So I searched. I spent 2 years looking. I brought in seers, witches, anyone who claimed they could help. And you know what I found? What? Nothing. No bond, no mate, no magic strong enough to undo what was done. He leaned back, his jaw tight. So I stopped looking. I learned to live without sight, and I moved on. But you didn't move on, Alara said softly. You're still angry, still broken. So are you. She flinched. Kael's gaze sharpened, locking onto her even though he couldn't see her. You think I don't know what you're doing? You're looking for answers, for revenge, for some proof that you're not just a ghost someone forgot to bury. But what happens when you find it? What happens when you get your answers and they're not what you wanted? Alara's throat tightened. At least I'll know. Will you? Or will you just find another reason to keep running? The words hit harder than she expected. She stood abruptly, turning away, her hands shaking. I'm not running. Yes, you are. You've been running since the moment you woke up in that cabin, and you'll keep running until someone forces you to stop. She whirled on him. You don't get to judge me. You don't know what I've been through. You're right, I don't. Kael stood, closing the distance between them. But I know what it's like to lose everything, to wake up one day and realize the life you thought you had was gone. So don't stand there and tell me I don't understand. They were close now, close enough that Alara could feel the heat radiating off him, see the rise and fall of his chest. His pale eyes were locked on her face, and for a moment she forgot he was blind. Why do you care? She whispered. Kael's jaw clenched. I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. And then, before she could say anything else, his hand moved, slow, hesitant, and his fingers brushed her cheek. The moment they touched, light exploded behind Kael's eyes. He jerked back with a sharp intake of breath, his hand dropping like he'd been burned. Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. "What just happened?" Kael's voice was rough, shaken. "I saw you." "What?" "For a second, just a flash, but I saw you." He stared at his hand like it belonged to someone else. "It's you, the bond. It's you." Alara took a step back, her mind reeling. "That's impossible." "That's what I said." Kael's laugh was sharp, almost panicked. "But it's the truth. Every time we touch, the curse weakens. I can feel it. But we've touched before. Why didn't... I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair, his composure fracturing. "Maybe it takes time. Maybe it needs proximity. I don't know how any of this works." Alara's hands were shaking. "If what you're saying is true, then whoever cursed you did it to keep us apart." Kael's eyes snapped to hers. "Which means they knew. They knew about the bond. About us." "Your mother. Maybe. Or someone working with her." Kael's expression darkened. "Either way, they'll do anything to keep us separated, including kill you." The weight of his words settled over her like a stone. Alara sank back onto the bench, her mind racing. "This is bigger than us," she said quietly. "Yes. If we restore the bond, if we break the curse, what happens?" Kael was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't know. But I think it's the only way we survive this." They stayed in the cabin until just before dawn. Neither of them slept. Kael sat by the door, staff across his knees, while Alara paced the small space, her thoughts spinning. Every piece of the puzzle was starting to fit together. Her father's murder, the erasure of her identity, Kael's curse, the bond. Someone had orchestrated all of it, and that someone was still out there, still in power, still pulling strings. When the first light began to creep through the shutters, Kael stood. "We need to move," he said. "Where?" "There's someone who might have answers, a woman who lives on the edge of the thornwood. She's old, older than anyone I know, and she's seen things the rest of us haven't." "A seer?" "Something like that." Alara grabbed the coat he'd given her and followed him out into the cold morning. The forest was quiet, the air crisp and sharp. They moved quickly, Kael leading the way with that same uncanny precision. They'd been walking for maybe an hour when Alara heard it. Voices. Distant but growing closer. Kael heard them too. He stopped, tilting his head. "They found us," he said. "How many?" "Too many." Alara's pulse spiked. "What do we do?" Kael grabbed her hand. "Run!" They bolted through the trees, branches whipping at their faces, roots catching their feet. The voices grew louder, closer, accompanied now by the baying of hounds. They were being hunted. Alara's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. And then the ground disappeared beneath her feet. She fell hard, tumbling down a steep embankment, rocks and dirt tearing at her skin. She hit the bottom with a bone-jarring thud and lay there, gasping, stars bursting behind her eyes. Kael was beside her in an instant, pulling her upright. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she lied. Her ankle throbbed, and blood ran warm down her arm. The voices were right above them now. The hounds howled. Kael pulled her into the shadow of a massive fallen tree and pressed a finger to his lips. They crouched there, barely breathing, as the hunters passed overhead. "She can't have gone far," someone shouted. "Spread out! Find her!" Alara's heart pounded so hard she was sure they'd hear it, but the footsteps moved on, fading into the distance. Kael waited another long moment before he moved. "We need to keep going." "I can barely walk. Then I'll carry you." But he was already lifting her, slinging her over his shoulder like she weighed nothing. And then he was moving again, fast and sure, navigating the forest like it was his own backyard. Alara clung to him, her head spinning, and tried not to think about how close they'd just come to dying. The woman's house appeared without warning, a small stone cottage nestled in a clearing surrounded by twisted, ancient trees. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the scent of herbs hung heavy in the air. Kael set Alara down carefully and knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately. The woman who stood in the doorway was impossibly old, her skin like crumpled parchment, her eyes milky and sightless. But when she looked at them, Alara felt seen in a way that made her skin crawl. "Kael Draven," the woman said, her voice a dry rasp. "I wondered when you'd come." "We need your help, Merrin." Merrin's gaze shifted to Alara and a slow smile spread across her face. "And you brought her. Finally." Alara stiffened. "You know me?" "I know what you are, child. What you were. What you will be." Merrin stepped aside, gesturing them in. "Come. We have much to discuss. And very little time." They stepped into the cottage, and Merrin closed the door behind them with a soft click. The interior was cramped and cluttered, filled with jars of strange substances, bundles of dried herbs, and shelves lined with books that looked older than the house itself. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Merrin settled into a chair by the fire and gestured for them to sit. "You've come because the bond is awakening," she said without preamble. Kael's jaw tightened. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm the one who helped curse you in the first place." The room went deathly silent. Alara's hands curled into fists. "What?" Merrin's milky eyes fixed on her. "Not by choice, child. I was compelled, threatened. My family's lives hung in the balance, so I did what I was told. I severed the bond between you and the Alpha King before it could fully form." "Why?" Kael's voice was dangerously low. "Because together, you are unstoppable. A thorn and a Draven, bound by fate and blood." The queen knew that if the bond was allowed to solidify, her power would crumble, so she had me sever it. Merrin's expression was grim. "But bonds like yours cannot be truly broken, only suppressed, and suppression requires maintenance." Alara's mind raced. "The drugs, the ones Marcus gave me." "Yes, they kept your memories locked away, kept your wolf dormant, kept you weak." Merrin leaned forward. "But the bond is stronger than any drug. The moment you and Kael touched, it began to heal. And now, the queen knows. She will do everything in her power to kill you before it's complete." "Then how do we stop her?" Kael demanded. "You complete the bond." "How?" Merrin's smile was thin. "You already know how, Alpha King. You've known since the moment you found her." Kael's expression went blank. Then understanding dawned, and he stood abruptly. "No. It's the only way." "I said no." "Kael," Alara started. "The claiming ritual requires—" He stopped, jaw working. "It requires a blood exchange, a marking. It's permanent, irreversible, and it ties us together for life." "Then we do it," Alara said. He whirled on her. "You don't understand what you're agreeing to." "I understand perfectly. If we don't do this, we both die. She wins. Everything my father built, everything he died for. It's all for nothing." Alara stood, meeting his gaze. "I'm not letting that happen." Kael's hands shook. "This isn't just about survival. If we do this, you'll be bound to me. You'll feel what I feel. You'll carry my mark. You'll—" "I know." Her voice was steady. "And I'm still saying yes." Merrin rose from her chair. "The moon is full tonight. The bond will be strongest then. But you must hurry. The queen's hunters are close." Kael looked at Alara for a long moment. Then he turned to Merrin. "What do we need to do?" The ritual was simple, brutal, ancient. Merrin led them to a clearing behind the cottage where a circle of standing stones jutted from the earth like broken teeth. The moon hung fat and silver overhead, bathing everything in cold light. "Stand in the center," Merrin instructed. Kael and Alara stepped into the circle. The air felt different here, charged, electric, like the moment before a storm. Merrin handed Kael a knife. The blade gleamed in the moonlight. "Cut your palm," she said. "Then hers." Kael hesitated. "Alara." "Do it," she said. He pressed the blade to his palm and dragged it across. Blood welled, dark and bright. Then he took Alara's hand, his touch gentle despite the violence of the moment, and did the same. Alara bit back a gasp as pain flared, but she didn't pull away. "Now, clasp hands," Merrin said. They did. Their blood mingled, warm and slick, and then the world exploded. Power surged through Alara like a tidal wave, raw, overwhelming, unstoppable. She felt Kael's presence slam into her mind, felt his fear and his strength and his desperate, aching need. She felt the bond snap into place like a chain being forged, binding them together in a way that went deeper than blood, deeper than bone. She gasped, knees buckling, but Kael held her upright. "Look at me," he said, his voice rough. She did. And for the first time in 5 years, Kael Draven could see. Not just flashes, not just shapes, everything. The silver of the moonlight, the green of her eyes, the blood on their joined hands. "It worked," he breathed. But before Alara could respond, pain ripped through her. She screamed, doubling over as her bones began to crack and reshape. Her skin burned, her muscles tore and reformed. "What's happening?" Kael shouted. Marin's voice was grim. "Her wolf, it's waking." Alara's scream turned into a roar as her body convulsed. She felt herself changing, growing, shifting, becoming something wild and powerful and utterly inhuman. And then, through the haze of agony, she heard them. Voices, footsteps, the baying of hounds. The hunters had found them. Kael grabbed his staff, his newly restored sight sharp and clear. "Marin, get inside. There's no time. Go!" The old woman fled as figures emerged from the trees, a dozen of them, armed and armored, surrounding the clearing. And at the front, her face cold and beautiful in the moonlight, was Queen Isolde. "Well," she said, her voice like ice, "isn't this touching?" Kael stepped in front of Alara, who was still writhing on the ground, her transformation incomplete. "Stay back," he warned. Isolde's smile was thin. "Or what? You'll fight all of us? You're good, Kael, but you're not that good. Try me." Isolde's expression hardened. "I didn't want it to come to this, but you've left me no choice." She raised a hand and the hunters drew their weapons. "Kill them both!" The hunters charged. Kael met them head on, his staff a blur of motion. But there were too many. He took down 2, then 3, but a blade caught his shoulder and he stumbled. And then Alara rose. The transformation was complete. She stood on 4 legs now, massive and silver white, her eyes blazing with a fury that burned hotter than the moon. She was a wolf, but not just any wolf. She was an alpha. Her roar shook the trees. And then she lunged. The first hunter never saw her coming. Alara's jaws closed around his throat before he could scream, and she tore sideways with a savagery that came from somewhere deep and primal. Blood sprayed hot across the frost-covered ground. She didn't stop to think about it, didn't stop to feel horror or guilt or anything human. She just moved. The second hunter swung his blade at her flank, but she was faster. She twisted, catching his wrist in her teeth and crushing bone. He dropped the sword with a howl. She released him and lunged at the next target, her claws tearing through leather and flesh like paper. Kyle was beside her now, his staff cracking against helmets and ribs. His movements were sharper than before, precise, lethal, no longer compensating for blindness. He could see every strike coming, every opening, every weakness. Together, they were devastating. 3 more hunters went down, then 4. The rest hesitated, falling back, their confidence crumbling as they realized what they were facing. Isolde stood at the edge of the clearing, her expression unreadable. She didn't look afraid. She looked furious. "Enough," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The remaining hunters stopped. Kael and Alara circled them, breathing hard, blood dripping from teeth and staff. Isolde's cold blue eyes fixed on Alara. "So, the little ghost has teeth." Alara growled low in her throat, a sound that vibrated through the ground. "You can shift all you want," Isolde continued. "It won't change the truth. You're nothing, a forgotten relic of a dead king. And even if you survive tonight, you'll never take back what you think is yours." Alara's lips pulled back, revealing fangs slick with blood. She wanted to lunge, wanted to tear Isolde apart the way she'd torn through the hunters. But Kael's voice cut through the haze. "Don't." She turned her massive head toward him. "She wants you to lose control," he said quietly. "Don't give her the satisfaction." Alara's muscles trembled with the effort of holding back. But slowly, painfully, she forced herself to step back. Isolde's smile was thin and sharp. "How noble, but it won't save you." She raised her hand again. Archers. From the trees, a dozen more figures emerged, bows drawn, arrows nocked, and aimed directly at Elara and Kael. Kael's grip tightened on his staff. You'd slaughter your own son? If that's what it takes to protect this kingdom, yes. From what? From the truth? From chaos. Isolde's voice was cold, absolute. You have no idea what you've unleashed. That girl is a thorn, and thorns bring nothing but ruin. My father didn't think so. Your father was a fool who paid for his loyalty with his life. The words hung in the air like a confession. Kael went very still. What did you just say? Isolde's expression didn't change. You heard me. You killed him. I did what needed to be done. Kael's face went white, then red. He trusted you. He loved you. And he would have destroyed everything we built for the sake of a dead king's legacy. Isolde's voice hardened. So yes, I killed him. Just like I killed Aldrich Thorn. Just like I'll kill you if you don't stand down. Elara felt Kael's rage through the bond. A wave of heat and violence so intense it made her own fury look small. She could feel his heart pounding, feel his hands shaking, feel the barely contained urge to charge straight at the woman who'd murdered his father. Don't, Elara said. The word came out as a growl, but Kael understood. He looked at her, his newly restored eyes bright with unshed tears and fury. She killed him, he said, his voice breaking. I know, but if you attack her now, we both die, and she wins. Kael's jaw clenched. Every muscle in his body screamed to move, to fight, to end this, but he stayed rooted in place. Isolde watched them both, her expression cool. Smart girl, too bad it won't matter. She nodded to the archers. On my mark. Wait, the voice came from behind her. A new figure stepped out of the trees. A man in council robes, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. Elara recognized him from the portrait gallery. Councillor Brendan, one of the oldest members of the Royal Council. Isolde turned. This doesn't concern you, Brendan. I'm afraid it does. Brendan moved forward, his gaze sweeping over the carnage in the clearing. You just confessed to regicide in front of witnesses. That concerns all of us. They won't live long enough to testify. Won't they? Brendan gestured and more figures emerged from the forest. Not hunters, counselors, guards loyal to the old regime. At least 24 of them, surrounding Isolde's forces. Isolde's composure cracked just slightly. What is this? A reckoning. Brendan's voice was hard. We've suspected for years, Isolde. The convenient accidents, the sealed records, the way you consolidated power after Aldrich's death. But we had no proof. He looked at Kael and Elara. Until now. Isolde's hand moved to the dagger at her belt. You have nothing. We have your confession, witnessed by half the council. Brendan nodded to the men and women standing with him. And we have her. He pointed at Elara. If what you say is true, if she really is Aldrich's daughter, then she has a stronger claim to the throne than anyone. She's a half-feral animal with no proof of her lineage. Then let's test it. Brendan turned to Elara. Can you shift back? Elara didn't know if she could. The wolf form felt natural now, like something she'd been missing her whole life. But she focused, reaching for the human part of herself, and slowly, painfully, felt her bones begin to crack and reshape. The transformation back was worse than the first one. She collapsed onto the frozen ground, gasping, her skin slick with sweat and blood. Kael was there immediately, shrugging off his cloak and wrapping it around her bare shoulders. Easy, he murmured. I've got you. Elara leaned into him, shaking, and forced herself to look up at Brendan. The old counselor's eyes widened. The eyes. She has Aldrich's eyes. Eye color proves nothing, Isolde snapped. No, but a blood test will. Brendan gestured to one of the guards. Take a sample. We'll have the royal physicians verify her lineage. Isolde's face went blank. You have no authority to... Oh, I have every authority. As head counselor, I'm invoking emergency protocols. You are hereby stripped of regency powers pending investigation into the murders of King Aldrich Thorn and Alpha King Darius Draven. Brendan's voice rang out clear and cold. Guards, arrest her. For a moment, no one moved. Then Isolde laughed. It was a terrible sound, bitter and sharp. You think this is over? You think arresting me changes anything? She looked at Alara, her smile vicious. Even if you are a thorn, you're broken, weak. You've spent 5 years as a drugged pet. You have no allies, no training, no idea how to rule. The moment I'm free, I'll finish what I started. You won't get free, Kale said quietly. Won't I? Isolde's eyes glittered. I've been playing this game for 15 years, boy. Your children compared to me. Maybe, but children grow up. Kale stepped forward, his restored sight burning into her. And you just gave us everything we needed to destroy you. Isolde's smile faltered. The guards moved in, seizing her arms. She didn't fight, just stood there, regal and cold, even as they bound her wrists. This isn't over, she said. Yes, Alara said, her voice hoarse but steady. It is. They took Isolde away in chains. Brendan stayed behind, along with several council members, as healers rushed forward to tend the wounded. Alara sat on a fallen log, wrapped in Kael's cloak, while a medic cleaned the cuts on her arms and checked her for serious injuries. You're lucky, the medic said. No broken bones, just bruising and lacerations. Alara didn't feel lucky. She felt hollowed out, exhausted. Kael sat beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. She could feel his presence through the bond now, solid, warm, grounding. It was strange, invasive, comforting. How are you holding up? He asked quietly. I don't know. That's fair. Brendan approached, his expression grave. We'll need you both to come back to the capital. There will be questions, testimony, a full investigation. And if the blood test proves I'm Aldrich's daughter, Alara asked, then you'll be recognized as the rightful heir to the Thorn line. Brendan hesitated, but that brings its own complications. The kingdom has been without a Thorn ruler for 15 years. Many won't accept the change easily. Meaning? Meaning you'll have enemies, powerful ones. Isolde wasn't working alone. She had allies in the council, the military, the noble houses. They won't just roll over because you have royal blood. Alara's hands clenched. So what do I do? You prove yourself. Brendan's gaze was steady. You show them you're not just Aldrich's daughter. You show them you're a leader. I don't know how to lead. Then you learn. Brendan glanced at Kael. And you'll have help. Kael's expression was unreadable. The bond complicates things. It does, but it also legitimizes the alliance between Thorn and Draven. If you stand together, you'll be nearly impossible to oppose. Brendan straightened. But that's a discussion for later. For now, rest. We leave at first light. He walked away, leaving them alone in the clearing. Alara looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. I killed people tonight. Yes. I didn't even think about it. I just did it. That's what the wolf is, Kael said quietly. Pure instinct, no hesitation. It's why we're dangerous. Does it get easier? No, but you learn to live with it. Alara closed her eyes. I don't know if I can do this. You already are. I'm serious, Kael. I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know how to rule. I barely know who I am. Then we figure it out together. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. You're not alone in this anymore. She looked at him. His pale eyes, no longer sightless, were steady and sure. You got your vision back. I did. How does it feel? Strange, overwhelming, like I'm seeing the world for the first time. He paused. But worth it. Even if it means being tied to me? Kael's grip tightened. Especially because it means being tied to you. Alara's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just held his hand and let the silence settle between them. Well, they returned to the capital 3 days later. The city was massive, far larger than Alara had expected. Stone buildings rose like mountains, streets twisted like rivers, and people filled every inch of space, their voices a constant roar. She rode beside Kael in a closed carriage, her heart pounding as they passed through the gates. Guards lined the streets, banners hung from windows. Word had already spread. The lost Thorn heir had returned. Not everyone was happy about it. Alara could see it in the faces of the people they passed. Some looked curious, others looked suspicious. A few looked outright hostile. They don't trust me, she said. They don't know you, Kael corrected. Give them time. And if they never accept me, then you make them. The carriage stopped in front of the royal palace, a massive structure of white stone and gold trim that made Alara's chest tighten. She'd been here before. She knew she had, but the memories were hazy, incomplete. Brendan was waiting at the entrance along with a contingent of guards and council members. The blood test results came back this morning, he said as Alara and Kael stepped out of the carriage. They're conclusive. You are Aldrich Thorne's daughter. Alara's knees went weak. Kael steadied her. So it's true, she whispered. Yes. Brendan's expression was grave. Which means, by law, you are the rightful heir to the Thorne throne. Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. Some of the council members looked pleased. Others looked furious. This is absurd, one of them said, a thin man with a sharp face. We're supposed to just accept some feral girl who's been missing for 15 years? We don't even know if she's sane. She's standing right here, Alara said coldly. The man's face flushed. You have no training, no education, no allies. You're a liability. And you're a coward. Alara stepped forward, ignoring Kael's warning hand on her arm. I may not have your training, but I survived 5 years of captivity. I escaped. I fought my way here, and I'm still standing. She looked around at the assembled council. So if you think I'm going to roll over and let you dismiss me, you're wrong. Silence. Then, from the back of the crowd, someone started clapping. It was a young woman, barely older than Alara, with dark skin and sharp eyes. She wore council robes, but they looked new, uncomfortable. Well said, the woman called. About time someone told Councillor Petrus what we've all been thinking. Petrus glared at her. Lady Sienna, this is not... Oh, shut up, Petrus. Sienna pushed her way to the front of the crowd and stopped in front of Alara. I'm Sienna Caldwell, newest member of the council and official pain in everyone's ass. She held out her hand. Welcome home, Your Highness. Alara stared at the offered hand, then took it. Sienna's grip was firm, confident. I'm not a princess yet, Alara said. No, but you will be. Sienna grinned. And when you are, I expect you to remember who had your back from day one. Despite everything, Alara felt a smile tug at her lips. Noted. Brendan cleared his throat. If we're quite finished, there's still the matter of the coronation. By law, it must take place within a month of the heir's confirmation. A month? Alara's stomach dropped. That's not enough time. It'll have to be. Brendan's expression was sympathetic but firm. The kingdom needs stability, and the longer we wait, the more time Isolde's allies have to organize. What about her trial? Kael asked. It's scheduled for 2 weeks from now. The evidence is overwhelming, but she'll still be allowed to present a defense. Brendan paused. Which means you'll need to testify. Alara's hands clenched. Fine. There's one more thing. Brendan hesitated. Isolde's daughter, Celeste. She's demanded an audience with you. Kael stiffened. Absolutely not. She has a right. She has no rights. Her mother is a murderer. For all we know, Celeste was complicit, which is why we need to hear what she has to say. Brendan looked at Alara. It's your decision. Alara thought about it. Celeste. She'd seen the girl once, briefly, during her time at the estate. Beautiful, cold. Isolde's perfect little mirror. I'll see her, Alara said. Alara, Kael started. I need to know what she knows. And if she's a threat, I want to see it for myself. Kael's jaw worked, but he nodded. Fine, but I'm coming with you. Part what? They met Celeste in a small receiving room deep in the palace. The girl was waiting when they arrived, standing by the window, her hands folded in front of her. She was stunning, pale skin, dark hair, blue eyes like her mother's. But when she turned to face them, Alara saw something unexpected. Fear. Thank you for seeing me, Celeste said quietly. You have 5 minutes, Kael said flatly. Celeste flinched. I know you have no reason to trust me. I know what my mother did, what she is. Well, her voice shook. But I need you to understand, I didn't know. Not all of it. Not until the night of the attack. And we're supposed to believe that? Kale's tone was ice. No, I don't expect you to believe anything I say. Celeste looked at Alara. But I need you to know that I'm not her. I don't want her legacy. I don't want her throne. I just want to survive this. Alara studied her. Celeste looked small, broken, nothing like the regal figure she'd projected before. What do you want from me? Alara asked. Nothing, Celeste's voice broke. I wanted to apologize for what she did to you, to your father, to all of us. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry. Alara didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to rage, to blame Celeste for every moment of suffering, but looking at the girl now, she just saw another victim. Where will you go? Alara asked quietly. I don't know. Exile, probably. If the council doesn't execute me first, they won't execute you. Celeste laughed bitterly. You don't know that. No, but I can make sure of it. Alara stepped forward. You're not your mother, and you don't deserve to pay for her crimes, so I'll speak on your behalf. But in return, you're going to tell me everything you know about her allies, every name, every secret, everything. Celeste's eyes widened. You'd do that? Yes, but only if you help me. For a long moment, Celeste just stared at her. Then she nodded. I'll tell you everything. Bossing. The trial came faster than Alara expected. She stood in the Grand Council chamber, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses, and watched as Isolde was brought in. The former queen looked smaller in chains, but no less dangerous. Her cold blue eyes swept the room, landing on Alara with a look of pure hatred. The charges were read. Regicide, conspiracy, attempted murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimonies from Marin, from Brendan, from Celeste, from the surviving hunters who'd turned on Isolde to save their own skins. Isolde didn't deny any of it. I did what needed to be done, she said when given the chance to speak. Aldrich Thorne was weak. He would have destroyed this kingdom with his idealism and his refusal to make hard choices. So I made them for him, for him. You murdered him, Brendan said. I saved us. Isolde's voice was hard. And I'd do it again. The chamber erupted in shouts. Guards had to restore order. When it was Alara's turn to testify, she walked to the front of the room and faced Isolde directly. You took everything from me, Alara said quietly. My father, my identity, my life. You erased me because you were afraid of what I could become. Isolde's smile was thin. I was right to be afraid. Look at you now. Yes. Look at me. Alara's voice strengthened. I survived. I escaped. I found the truth. And now I'm taking back everything you stole. You think you've won? Isolde leaned forward, her chains rattling. You're a child playing at queen. You have no idea what you're up against. Maybe. But I'm not afraid of you anymore. Isolde's expression flickered, just for a moment. Then it hardened again. You should be. The council voted unanimously, guilty on all counts. Isolde was sentenced to life imprisonment in the northern fortress, with no possibility of parole. As the guards led her away, she looked back at Alara one last time. This isn't over, she said. Alara didn't respond. She just watched as the woman who'd destroyed her family disappeared through the doors. And then, for the first time in 15 years, she let herself breathe. The coronation was set for the following week. Alara stood in her chambers, staring at the gown laid out on the bed. It was white and gold, embroidered with the thorn crest, a snarling wolf beneath a crown of thorns. You don't have to do this, Kael said from the doorway. Alara looked at him. Yes, I do. There's still time to walk away, to choose a different life. What life? The one where I'm nobody? Where I pretend none of this happened? She shook her head. I'm done running, Kael. This is who I am. Kael crossed the room and took her hands. Then I'll be beside you, every step. Even if it means being bonded to a queen? Especially then. Alara smiled, small but genuine. You're ridiculous. So are you. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, the bond humming between them. Then Alara pulled away and picked up the gown. Help me with this? Kael's lips twitched. I'm not sure I'm qualified. You'll figure it out. And somehow, he did.
Aquesis
Apa saan nangyayari?
The coronation took place in the Grand Hall, in front of the entire court. Alara walked down the aisle alone, her head high, her steps steady. The crown was heavy when they placed it on her head, but she didn't falter. I, Alara Thorne, do solemnly swear to protect this kingdom and its people, to rule with justice and mercy, to honor the legacy of those who came before me, and to build a future worthy of their sacrifice. The hall erupted in applause, and for the first time since she'd escaped that cabin in the woods, Alara felt like she'd finally come home. The applause faded slowly, but Alara barely heard it. She stood on the dais, the weight of the crown pressing down on her head, and looked out at the sea of faces, nobles, counselors, guards, servants. Some looked pleased, others looked uncertain. A few still looked hostile. She'd won the crown, but she hadn't won them, not yet. Kale stood at the front of the crowd, his pale eyes locked on hers. Through the bond she could feel his pride, his worry, his unwavering support. It was enough. Brendan stepped forward and raised his hands for silence. Queen Alara Thorne has been crowned. Long may she reign. The crowd echoed the words, some louder than others. Long may she reign. Alara descended from the dais, and the nobles parted to let her pass. She could feel their eyes on her, measuring, judging, waiting for her to stumble. She didn't. The celebration that followed was supposed to be grand. Music, dancing, a feast that would last until dawn, but Alara couldn't focus on any of it. She moved through the great hall like a ghost, smiling when expected, nodding when spoken to, but her mind was elsewhere. Sienna found her near the windows, staring out at the city below. "You look miserable," Sienna said, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of wine. "I'm fine." "Liar." Sienna handed her a glass. "Drink. It helps." Alara took a sip. The wine was rich and warm, but it did nothing to calm the knot in her stomach. "I don't know what I'm doing." "None of us do. That's the secret." Sienna leaned against the window frame. "You think any of those pompous idiots out there know what they're doing? Half the council couldn't organize a harvest festival, let alone run a kingdom." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "It's supposed to make you feel normal." Sienna grinned. "You're not some perfect savior descending from the heavens. You're a person, flawed, messy, human, and that's exactly what this kingdom needs." Alara looked at her. "Why are you helping me?" "Because Isolde's regime was built on lies and fear, and I'm tired of living in a kingdom that eats its own." Sienna's expression turned serious. "You're not perfect, but you're real, and that's worth fighting for." Before Alara could respond, a commotion erupted at the far end of the hall. Raised voices, the scrape of chairs. She turned to see a group of nobles gathered around Councillor Petrus, their faces flushed with wine and anger. "Here we go," Sienna muttered. Petrus broke away from the group and strode toward Alara, his face twisted with indignation. "Your Majesty," he said, the title dripping with sarcasm. "A word." "Say what you need to say, Counselor." "Very well." Petrus's voice rose, loud enough for half the hall to hear. "You may have the crown, but you don't have the respect of this court. You're an outsider, a stranger, and many of us believe this coronation was a mistake." The hall went silent. Every eye turned toward them. Alara felt the bond flare, Kyle's fury burning through their connection. She could see him moving through the crowd, his jaw tight, his hands clenched, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "A mistake?" she said calmly. "Yes. You have no experience, no training. You've spent the last 5 years as a captive, drugged and controlled. How can we trust you to lead?" "You can't." Alara set down her wine glass. "Not yet. But I'm not asking for your trust, Counselor. I'm asking for your patience." Petrus sneered. "Patience won't rebuild what's been broken." "No, but it'll give me time to prove I'm worth following." She stepped closer, holding his gaze. "You're right. I'm inexperienced. I don't know all the rules of your court. I don't know the history of every noble house or the intricacies of trade agreements, but I know what it's like to survive. I know what it's like to fight for every breath, and I know what it's like to have everything taken from you." The hall was deathly quiet now. "This kingdom has been fractured," Alara continued, "divided, ruled by fear and lies, and I'm going to change that. Not because I'm perfect, but because I refuse to let my father's legacy die with him. She looked around the hall, meeting as many eyes as she could. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to respect me. But you will work with me. Because I'm not going anywhere. Petrus's face went red. You arrogant... Enough. Brendan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stepped forward, his expression hard. Counselor Petrus, you're out of line. The coronation is done. The law is clear. Queen Alara is our sovereign, and you will show her the respect her position demands. Petrus opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. He gave a stiff bow and retreated into the crowd, muttering under his breath. Brendan turned to Alara. Well handled, Your Majesty. Alara let out a shaky breath. That was a disaster. No, that was necessary. Brendan's gaze was steady. Petrus needed to be put in his place, and the court needed to see that you won't be pushed around. Sienna appeared at her side again, grinning. See? You're already getting the hang of it. Later that night, Alara retreated to her private chambers, exhausted and drained. The crown sat on a velvet cushion on the table, gleaming in the firelight. She stared at it, her mind racing. A knock at the door. Come in, she called. Kale stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He looked as tired as she felt. You should be at the celebration, Alara said. So should you. I couldn't stay. Too many people. Too much noise. Kyle crossed the room and sat beside her on the couch. You did well tonight. I barely survived, Petrus. You survived. That's what matters. Alara leaned back, closing her eyes. I don't know if I can do this, KL. Leading, ruling, all of it. You can. How do you know? Because I've seen you fight. I've seen you survive. And I felt your strength through the bond. He took her hand. You're not doing this alone, Alara. You have allies. You have me. She opened her eyes and looked at him. What if I fail? Then we fail together. Despite everything, she smiled. You're terrible at pep talks. I know. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly. Then Alara said, What happens now? Now you rebuild. You find your footing. You make this kingdom yours. And Isolde's allies? We deal with them, one by one. Alara's jaw tightened. She said it wasn't over. She's locked in a fortress. She can't hurt you anymore. Can't she? Alara pulled her hand away, standing. She spent 15 years building her power. You think all of that just disappears because she's in chains? Kael stood as well. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to be ready, because she's not done, and neither are the people who helped her. The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks later. Alara was in a council meeting discussing trade agreements with the southern provinces when a messenger burst into the room. Your Majesty, the man gasped, out of breath. There's been an attack on the northern fortress. Alara's blood went cold. What kind of attack? A prison break. The messenger swallowed hard. They freed the prisoners, including the Queen Regent. The room erupted in chaos. Counselors shouted over each other, demanding answers, assigning blame, but Alara barely heard them. Her mind was racing. Isolde was free. Kael was on his feet, his expression deadly. How many escaped? At least a dozen, including some of the nobles who were implicated in the conspiracy. Where are they now? Unknown. They vanished into the northern forests. Alara stood, her voice cutting through the noise. Mobilize the guard. I want search parties sent out immediately, and I want a full report on how this happened. Brendan nodded. I'll see to it. We need to secure the city, Sienna added. If Isolde's allies are planning something, the capital is the most likely target. Agreed. Alara looked at Kael. We need to find her before she rallies her forces. I'll lead the search myself, Kael said. No. Alara's voice was firm. We go together. Alara, I'm not staying here while you risk your life. We're bonded. We do this together. Kael's jaw worked, but he nodded. Together. They left at dawn, accompanied by a hand-picked team of guards and trackers. The northern forests were dense and unforgiving, the air cold enough to freeze breath. Alara rode beside Kael, her wolf senses sharp, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. They found the first body 3 hours into the search. One of the guards, throat torn out, left in the middle of the trail like a warning. She's baiting us, Kael said quietly. I know. We should turn back, regroup. No. Laura dismounted, kneeling beside the body. The wounds were brutal, efficient. She wants me to be afraid, to second-guess myself. I'm not giving her that. Kael dismounted as well, his expression tense. Then we need to be smart. She knows these forests. She'll use them against us. Alara stood, wiping her hands on her cloak. Then we use them too. They pressed on, following the trail deeper into the forest. The trees grew thicker, the shadows longer. Alara could feel the bond humming with tension, Kael's instincts screaming danger. And then they heard it, laughter, cold and mocking. Welcome, Your Majesty. Isolde stepped out from behind a tree, flanked by a dozen armed men. She looked different, wilder, her hair loose, her eyes bright with a feral gleam. But she was still every inch the queen she'd once been. I was wondering when you'd come, Isolde said. Alara's hand moved to the blade at her hip. You're under arrest, Isolde laughed. Am I? And who's going to enforce that? You? She looked at the guards behind Alara. Or these poor fools who'll die trying. We don't have to do this, Kael said, his voice hard. Surrender now and you'll be treated fairly. Fairly? Isolde's smile was sharp. You mean locked in a cell for the rest of my life? I think I'll pass. Then you'll die, Alara said flatly. So will you. Isolde raised her hand and the forest exploded into violence. Her men charged, and the guards met them head on. Steel clashed against steel, screams echoed through the trees. Alara drew her blade and moved to meet the first attacker, her wolf instincts guiding her strikes. She took down 2 men, then 3. But there were too many, and they were good. Kael fought beside her, his staff a blur of motion, but even he couldn't hold them all back. And then Isolde was there, a dagger in her hand, moving with deadly precision. You should have stayed in your cage, she hissed, lunging. Alara blocked the strike, barely, and countered with a slash that Isolde dodged. They circled each other, breathing hard, eyes locked. You can't win, Isolde said. You're too weak, too broken. Maybe, but I'm still here. Alara shifted. The transformation was faster this time, smoother. Her bones cracked and reformed. Her muscles surged with power. And in seconds she was on 4 legs, teeth bared. Isolde's confidence faltered. Alara lunged. They collided in a tangle of fur and steel. Isolde's blade bit into Alara's shoulder, but Alara's jaws closed around her wrist, crushing bone. Isolde screamed, dropping the dagger, and Alara pinned her to the ground. For a moment the forest went silent. Alara stood over Isolde, breathing hard, blood dripping from her muzzle. She could end it now. 1 bite, 1 tear, and it would be over. But then Kael's voice cut through the haze. Don't. Alara looked up. Kael was standing a few feet away, his staff lowered, his eyes on her. Don't become her, he said quietly. You're better than this. Alara's wolf growled, every instinct screaming to finish it, but slowly, painfully, she stepped back. Isolde lay on the ground, gasping, her wrist shattered. She looked up at Alara, her eyes wide with something that might have been fear. You should have killed me, she said. I know. Alara shifted back, her human form trembling with exhaustion. But I'm not you. The remaining guards surrounded Isolde, binding her in chains. This time, they weren't taking any chances. They returned to the capital 3 days later. Isolde was locked in the deepest cell of the palace dungeons, under constant guard. Her allies were rounded up and arrested. The conspiracy was finally, truly over. Alara stood in the throne room looking out at the gathered court. Petrus was there, along with Brendan, Sienna, and dozens of others. They looked tired, wary, but not hostile. The threat is ended, Alara said. Isolde and her conspirators will face justice, and this kingdom will move forward. How? Petrus asked. His tone was less confrontational now, almost genuine. Together. Alara met his gaze. I know I'm not the queen you expected. I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm willing to work for it, to earn your trust. If you're willing to give me the chance. Petrus was silent for a long moment, then he bowed. Your Majesty. One by one, the others followed. Well, that night, Alara stood on the balcony of her chambers looking out at the city. Lights flickered in the windows below, and the distant sound of music drifted on the wind. Kael joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Strange. Overwhelming. Terrifying." "That's fair." She leaned into him, feeling the bond settle between them. Warm, steady, unbreakable. "Do you think we'll be okay?" "I think we'll figure it out." "That's not very reassuring." "It's the truth." Alara smiled despite herself. "You're still terrible at pep talks." "I know." They stood there in silence, watching the city breathe, and for the first time in as long as Alara could remember, she felt something close to peace. 3 months later, the kingdom had changed. Alara had begun implementing reforms, fairer trade agreements, better support for the outer provinces, transparency in the council. It wasn't easy. There were still nobles who resisted, still factions who wanted power for themselves. But slowly, steadily, things were improving. Sienna had become one of her closest advisors, along with Brendan. Celeste, true to her word, had provided invaluable information about Isolde's network and had been granted clemency in exchange for her testimony. And Kael was always there, by her side, in her corner, steady and sure. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Alara stopped in front of the fountain with the stone wolf. "I used to play here," she said quietly, "before everything happened." Kael took her hand. "Do you remember much?" "Pieces, fragments, but it's enough. And the rest? I'll rebuild it, just like I'm rebuilding everything else." Kael smiled. "You're going to be a good queen, Alara." "You think so?" "I know so." She looked up at him, at the man who'd found her in the darkness, and refused to let her go. The bond between them hummed with warmth, with certainty, with something that felt a lot like love. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you want?" "This." Kael gestured to the garden, the palace, the kingdom beyond. "You, us, a future that isn't defined by curses and conspiracies." "That sounds nice." "It does, doesn't it?" Alara leaned up and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, but it felt right. When she pulled back, Kael was smiling. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, just, I'm glad I found you. I'm glad I ran into you." Literally. Literally. They walked back toward the palace together, hand in hand, as the sun set behind them. The kingdom stretched out before them, imperfect, complicated, but theirs. And for the girl who'd been erased, who'd survived captivity and betrayal and her own forgotten past, it was more than enough. It was everything. But years later, when people told the story of Queen Alara Thorne, they talked about her strength, her courage, the way she'd risen from nothing to reclaim her throne. But the people who knew her, really knew her, told a different story. They talked about the way she listened, the way she fought for the forgotten and the broken, the way she rebuilt a kingdom not with power, but with stubborn, relentless hope. And they talked about the Alpha King who stood beside her, the man who'd been cursed and broken and had found his sight again in the arms of a woman who'd been just as lost as he was. Together they forged something new, something better, a kingdom built not on fear but on trust, not on lies, but on truth. And when their first child was born, a daughter with silver eyes and a wolf's heart, the kingdom celebrated for 7 days, because the girl who'd been erased had become a queen. And the future she built was brighter than anyone could have imagined. The wild had shaped them, the truth had freed them, and the bond between them had made them unbreakable. Under the same moon that had once witnessed her transformation, Alara stood on the palace balcony, her daughter in her arms, Kael at her side. "What do you think?" Kael asked, looking down at their child. "I think she's perfect." "She's going to be a terror." "Probably." They stood there together, a family forged in fire and blood, an impossible hope, and watched as the kingdom they'd fought so hard to save settled into the quiet peace of evening. And for the first time in her life, Alara Thorne, the girl who'd been a ghost, a captive, a nobody, felt truly, completely home.